Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Ripley episode 5. It's called Lucio. So spoilers for the episode as always. This is a Patreon sponsored review, so thanks to Fletcher for picking the show. This is another murder episode, which is exciting because this is when the show is at its best, when Ripley's put in a position where he has to improvise and then he has to obsess over the details, and the cinematography likewise obsesses over the details. A lot of repetition in the shots, very intentionally, which is effective because it makes you focus on certain areas, certain items in the room that may have blood on them, for example. That's a big part of this episode. Whereas the evidence being left is Ripley missing something. So we'll get into it all. Also, this kind of does the link up with the first episode. The opening of the first episode obviously teased this murder where he was dragging a body down some stairs, and we get that in this episode. This is kind of where that comes back round. So this is Freddy, the friend character of Dickie's, that was very suspicious of Ripley when they met back in episode 2, I want to say, but he shows up out of the blue after we get our opening, which is basically just Ripley renting an apartment. He goes and finds one and gets shown around, and again, it sort of lavishes in the details of him enjoying the place. It looks luxurious. It looks like a place that he's going to be happy with. I also thought, oh, this maybe gets around the whole Marge looking at all the hotels and try to find out where he is. In fact, he even sends her another letter from Dickie explaining that, oh, he's probably going to go to Sicily for a while. He's not really, but that's what he's saying to try and throw her off the scent. So he's feeling quite confident. The one thing he does do is that he rips off the name tag on the buzzer at the front door, because he's not comfortable with Dickie's name being there. He'd rather not be found. But the thing that actually ends up leading to him is actually the fact that there's a phone. Freddy phoned someone at the phone company and asked about if there's anyone registered under the name with Dickie, and of course he is. So that leads him here. And what's so good about this is they spend a lot of time, every time he comes in and out of the building, the landlady keeps saying, oh, the elevator's not fixed, I'm so sorry. And he's like, that's okay. And he's happy. He's in a good mood. He's getting his new place. He's gotten away with murder. He's spending Dickie's money. And he comes up and down a few times without using the elevator. But right before we get Freddy showing up is when he comes back home and the landlady's like, hey, the elevator's fixed. And he's like, oh, fantastic, it's a miracle. So he goes into this tiny little elevator and he goes up, and it really focuses on the elevator. It really focuses on the fact that the landlady's cat is always sitting on the bench at the bottom of the elevator. Outside of it in the lobby kind of area, there's this little bench and the cat's always sitting there watching every time Ripley comes in and out, which is fun because it's like this idea that there's a constant witness that he doesn't really think about, because what can the cat do? Can't say anything. Haha! But by the end of the episode, the cat's the one that's going to have put him in the shit. But more on that in a bit. But what's really good about this though is it really spends a lot of time in the episode making you think about the elevator, because it's constantly not working. It's broken. There's a guy in fixing it. It's constantly bringing it up. Every time he comes in, the landlady mentions it, and then it's working. So you're really almost relishing the idea that he's finally getting to use the elevator. Like, his perfect apartment is now completely, fully functional. He's filled it with stuff and all the rest of it. He's went out and bought a new ashtray. He's bought a couple other things. He's got the watch fixed. He's on top of the world. But as he's riding up in this elevator, the cinematography really emphasizes and makes you look at how the elevator's working. Not because it's important that we understand how an elevator works, but it really focuses on the counterweight going up and down, and more importantly, all you hear for this extended few seconds is the sound of the elevator. And what makes that so good is that when he's in the apartment and he's painting away, because it's not just enough that he's taking all of Dickie's money, he still has to go along with the story of matching up with who Dickie was, even though these new people that he's meeting would never know who Dickie was anyway. But he's still saying that he's studying art. He's still saying a lot of the things that Dickie would say. Like, I mean, I get why he's still saying Dickie's parents, own a boating company, because, yeah, okay, someone might actually look that up and it has to track, but he's still sticking to the personality that he's stolen, which is very interesting from like a psychological perspective. But he's in there painting, and the door buzzer rings. He ignores it, because who knows he's here? Right? So he just ignores it. And then the phone rings. And that really startles him, because now it's like a 1-2 punch, right? Someone's clearly trying to contact him. And then you just hear the elevator. You hear the rumble and the hum of the elevator, and he stands there in the hallway staring at the door as he hears this elevator rising up to his floor, and you hear the clanking of the door shut and the footsteps coming towards the door, and then eventually the knock on the door. This was all exceptional, because all of this, like the episode just kind of made you think about the elevator so much that by the time we get to this point and we're just standing there hearing the elevator from the other side of the door, it becomes this sound of dread of who is coming to the door, because that's all Ripley's ever going to think now is who's coming to the door, because he doesn't want anyone to come to the door. Anyone who comes to the door could be someone who's going to expose what's going on here. So it's this tense thing as he's listening to the sound, and then probably the worst case scenario for him is that it's a voice he recognizes. It's Freddy. And Freddy is saying, "Hey, Dickie, it's me. Let me in. I know you're in. The landlady said you were in." So he can't even pretend he's not in. He has to go to the door. He has to open it. And obviously, he's not Freddy. He's not Dickie. He's Ripley. He has to stand there and make some excuse on the fly with no prompting. And Freddy was always suspicious of Ripley, so every single thing Ripley says, Freddy is making side eyes, is basically not believing a word he says. It's quite clear he doesn't believe a word he says. All of it is really well done. So we get like a 10-minute portion here where it's just the sort of the back and forth of Ripley trying to not play dumb, but oh yeah, Dickie had to go out, he had an errand. In fact, no, I think he was going to meet someone at some location. Maybe he could go try and find him. Oh, really? Now it's changed. Now the story's changed. And Freddy keeps pointing out the inconsistencies. The whole thing feels very tense. And of course, the entire time I'm sitting watching all this stuff play out, I'm like, well, he has to give up this apartment and move now, because now someone who knows Dickie knows he's here. And this is like the whole thing's unraveling. But where it really picks up is that Freddy finally leaves the apartment. And it's all very awkward. It's all very whatever. Freddy's even pointing out that Ripley's wearing the same shoes that both him and Dickie have, and they bought them in Florence. Tom says he got them in New York. Clearly, that seems like a lie, and all of it's unraveling, right? But Freddy's not content, so Freddy goes to the landlady, and we get this scene where Ripley's at the top of the stairwell looking down, watching this conversation. And I was convinced, by the way, that Freddy was going to look up at the end of the scene and catch Ripley watching this. Doesn't, but I really thought that was going to happen. But Ripley's listening to the conversation, and the landlady's like, yeah, Dickie's in. She doesn't call him Dickie, obviously, but yeah, he's in. And Freddy's like, no, he's not. Like, yes, he is, I assure you. I can assure you he is not. So it never quite gets to that point where Freddy starts asking the landlady what she thinks Dickie looks like or anything like that. But clearly this is a huge problem, that these two people are disagreeing with who Dickie is, with who's in the apartment right now. So Freddy comes right back up. And Ripley tries to play dumb and say, oh, did you leave something behind? And from here, Freddy comes in and says, okay, what's really going on? Ripley plays dumb and just keeps pushing the questions and ultimately says, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go get the police because something's not quite right here. You're wearing his clothes. You're in the apartment. Even points out that Dickie wouldn't be caught dead wearing that bathrobe that Ripley picked out in the very first episode. We're still bringing that back up, which is fun. All of this is building and building to a certain point where you know Ripley has to kill Freddy. He has to. There's no other way out at this point. Because even if he runs, even if he just bolts it so he's not here when the police get back, Freddy points out that he won't get very far. But not only that, the bigger problem is that once they're snooping around and consider Dickie missing, he can't just walk into a bank and take money out of Dickie's account anymore. Everything's going to be frozen. The entire scheme is up. This way of life that he's stolen for himself will completely be gone. Even if he gets away with it in the sense that he's able to run and not get caught as a killer, he won't be able to keep, you know, milking this cash cow that he's made for himself, that he wants to keep. So the ashtray that he just bought this episode, that he was very happy to have purchased, he picks up and uses that as the weapon, and it's just as Freddy opens the front door that he bashes over the head. Doesn't kill on the first blow, admittedly. It takes a second blow, where Freddy, I guess, kind of tries to fight back, but it's less of a fight and more just like a desperate kind of lunge. And we get the second blow to the head, and that seemingly has done the deed, right? Freddy's dead. The final nightmare. Sorry, I'm jumping to bad horror movies here. So what's so good is at this point it kind of becomes a lot of the boat episode, in that it's now, okay, this unplanned murder had to take place, and now Ripley has to deal with that. And there's beautiful just details here, like the blood spatter on the painting, right? Excellent. The fact that he can't really do anything about the body right now, so just sort of drags it into the living room and doesn't really know what to do. And just the idea that someone could have seen because the door was open. I don't think they did, but they could have done. Like, it was exposed. Like, if anyone just happened to walk past in the hall at that moment, they would have seen some of this. They would have seen the murder take place. You get the feeling the entire episode that Ripley is hanging on by a thread. The entire thing is about to unravel, and he's just barely keeping it together. And this entire thing from here on out is him desperately trying to stop it from happening. So it leads to a bunch of problems here. One is he tries to clean up the blood from on the floor that's leaking from the head, and when he throws that scarf or whatever into the bathtub, it leaves this perfect visual of the blood dripping down from the inside of the tub, where you can still see that in the foreground for a good bit. I thought that was a really nice, beautiful shot. He then has some time because he can't really move the body out. In fact, one of the little details here is that when he looks through the pockets of Freddy, he finds car keys, and also, you know, what you'd expect, a wallet, passport, whatever. But he finds car keys, and he's like, shit, that's a potential problem. It's also maybe a solution to a problem, but it's a potential problem in that this guy's car is outside. So he goes outside, and as he does so, the landlady notices him walk past and kind of like tries to see, like, oh, and she looks back up towards the apartment like, that's weird. That other guy went up and has not come back down, but now Mr. Greenleaf's already leaving. Like, that's what's going through her head. And it really sets up this idea that this landlady, because of where her office is, where she deals with the administration stuff and all that, is at the entrance of the building, and you have to walk past her. She basically is always keeping an eye out for who's coming and going out the building. And that's a big problem, right? It sets up this huge obstacle for Ripley to deal with. So he has to find what the car is, and unfortunately for him, there's a lot of Fiats. But he finds the car, and it's like, okay, that's that. But he can't do anything now, right? He has to wait until the landlady's gone, and hopefully also think of some kind of a plan. So he intentionally, like, pours booze into Freddy's dead mouth and tries to make it look like he's been here for a while, so he can tell the idea later that, oh, he was here until 9 o'clock or whatever. He was here till sometime late and left after you were at your post, landlady, after you had went to your apartment and went to sleep, or at least weren't there. It all happened after that. But it all sets up the fact that he's going to have to try and move this body out of the apartment down to the ground level and get his body to the car. And it really shows that he's not thinking about this clearly, that he's making mistakes, right? And he has done, like, throughout the entire show, but he's really making mistakes here. One of the things that really stuck out to me is that, you know, he takes the body outside, he's sort of like holding it over his shoulder, but then that becomes tough. And he goes into the elevator, and there's this moment of absolute fear. It's beautiful, because the elevator halfway down stops working. And for a minute, he thinks he's trapped in there with that dead body until someone finds him. And that ain't going to look so good. That's going to look pretty bad. He's able to get the door open, but there is that moment of just sheer horror in his face as he's pressing the button aggressively. Like, come on, like, it can't all end like this. He gets out, though. But on his way, taking the body out, the back of the body, like the head, smears blood on the glass and the elevator wall. And then he's dragging the body down the stairs. And this was the visual I remember quite vividly from the start of episode 1, where it teased all this stuff. Is him dragging the body down the stairs, and the head sort of like hitting off the steps. At one point, there's like a, someone opens the door and says, "Who's there?" because it's making a bit of noise, and he just kind of freezes. It's all very tense. It's all really well done. The cat's watching all this. This constant witness that's going to be very relevant soon. And there's a whole, like, again, further obstacle of him trying to, like, carry the body like it's a drunk person to the car, and has to even, like, sell that idea when people, like, say hello, is that guy okay? There's a woman walking past, so he kisses the body as if they're making out. All of these little bits just really selling the trek from the apartment door down to this car was like a minefield. A minefield of potential of being caught, of being just complete red-handed, literally, because there's blood on his hands. And he puts him in the car. And what really baffled me here, and this is what really made me feel like he was making mistakes, is that he immediately just started driving as soon as he got the body in the car to wherever he was going. And I thought, what are you doing? Why? Okay, you've got him in the car now. The hard part of getting him out the building is over. Why wouldn't you, make sure he can't be seen too well in the car, right? Put him under a blanket or something. Maybe even put him in the boot when no one's watching. I don't know. But surely the blood that's in the steps and in the elevator is more of a concern right now for being caught. The body can sort of hide in the car for a bit whilst you go and clean that before anyone sees it. I know it's late. And what's so good about that is that they do this thing, because he makes this trip multiple times, where he like drives through, very sort of scenic parts of the city, and it really focuses on some of the buildings and some of the statues that he passes. The first time the longest, because it's really emphasizing them. And the reason why it's doing that is that when he gets the cab back, you see all these locations quickly again, and we get a sense of the journey. And part of the reason why it's doing that, at least I think why it's doing that, is that it really wants you to feel the time that he's taking doing all this. How long those steps in that elevator are covered in blood when he's not there. I think that nail-biting tension really comes from that. It really sells the amount of time that's passing by seeing all these different parts of the journey. As quick as they happen on the time back, it's so well done. Obviously, he drops the car off at a place and just walks somewhere else. I actually thought he was dumb for not putting the body in the driver's seat. I thought the whole point was to make it look like he'd like maybe crashed the car or something and hit his head because he was drunk. I thought that's what he was going for. Not that the booze that he poured into his body would have been consumed like he was alive, and I suspect it wouldn't show up like that. So he did have a couple of drinks before he died, admittedly, so there would at least be some booze in his system, but probably not enough to suggest that he was completely obliterated. But yeah, you get the trip back, right? So you see all the statues and stuff, and he gets back to the apartment building, and he's coming in. I was almost a little disappointed there wasn't like a scene where he had to somehow sneak past the landlady, because that may have been fun. But still, he was smart enough to not do it when she was there. But he gets to the staircase, and he starts walking up, and he sees the blood on the staircase. He sees the blood in the elevator, and obviously, he freaks out and bolts up. Like, I thought he made a choice not to clean this up and deal with the body first, which I thought was silly, because dealing with the body is going to take more time. He'd be better off cleaning the blood first. But this made it clear he just didn't think of it. He either didn't notice, or by the time he got the body in the car, he was so laser focused on just dealing with that problem that he did not think about this. He was surprised to see this and freaked out. So he runs up to the apartment, he grabs some cloths or whatever, wets them, and comes running out and has to scrub all this as quickly as he can. And it's this very tense moment. It's this very, like, heavy breathing. I think that's my favorite part of it, actually, is that he's kind of panting as he's doing it because he's really scared that he's going to get caught at any second. But he does it, right? He cleans this stuff. He comes back into the apartment. He even finishes cleaning the blood on the floor with the same rags or whatever. And he sits down at the chair. There's this glass of booze that he poured for himself earlier on that he picks up, and he's about to take a drink of it, and then his head just turns. He's realized something. And I thought it's because he wanted to put him in the driver's seat, funnily enough. Instead, what it is he runs downstairs, he gets another cab, takes him all the way back. So again, we see a lot of the same landmarks on this journey to sell that he's doing this trip again. And he goes to the car, and it turns out what he's actually going there for is to take out the passport and the wallet, to take all the identifiers away. Because after all, like the the easier or the more difficult he makes it for them to identify the body, because it is obviously the 60s, like they don't have quite the same level of science to do that sort of thing. Maybe Freddy's got a dental record they can check. Maybe Freddy was arrested at some point, so his fingerprints are on record. I mean, you know, there's a couple of possibilities, obviously, where they could identify him, but making it difficult seems like the best option for him right now, right, for Ripley. So he does that. He gets those things, and he drives back, or sorry, he gets to a cab again from the same sort of bar that he got the cab from the first time, and gets a cab back to the apartment. Finally, he goes back into the upstairs, into the apartment, and he sits down and finally takes a sip of his booze, and his head kind of turns again, like he's maybe thought of something, but then he kind of shrugs it off and goes, no, as if he thinks he's being paranoid, and takes another sip. And the camera does this thing, right? The edit does this thing where it starts repeating shots of all the places the body's been, where it shows the where the body was on the floor, shows the painting again where there was blood, shows the elevator again, it shows you the firing angle showing up the elevator shaft, which is quite cinematic. That was the same shot we got a few times when the elevator was operating and he got stuck and whatnot. And then ultimately, though, as this was all playing out, I was thinking, oh, this is going to end on something that he's missed, right? We're showing all the things that he cleaned, we're showing all the places the body was, we're going to end on something that he did not catch. And then ultimately, we get to this step where there's still some blood, but more importantly, there's paw prints. There's bloody paw prints. The cat has walked through the blood and went up some of the stairs before it's finally faded away from the paws. But you can see the blood there. The evidence is there. And of course, I think for the first time in the show, I don't recall them doing this at all yet. Maybe you can remind me if I've forgotten anything. But the blood is red. For the first time, it's not all black and white. There's some color in the blood. That's an inspired choice. It's one of those things where because there's been no color up until this moment in the show, it makes this feel like an even bigger deal. It makes it feel like it's super important that this blood's here, that it's not just something else he's going to have a chance to cover up. People are going to see this. Hell, the cat's paw might have still have blood on it. Maybe the landlady will see that on the cat. But regardless, this is a big deal. This is, no. It's the same, in the same way, if you don't have any swearing for like 10 hours and then someone drops an F-bomb, it feels really harsh. Or in that great Sam Esmail show on Amazon, Homecoming, there was a whole thing where there was like part of the story was in this really weird thin aspect ratio, and there was a moment where it changed, and that moment where it changed was a big deal. I don't want to spoil any of the context around it, but it's this idea again with the black and white and then finally introducing a little bit of color. It just had so much like impact and pop because it's the first time you're seeing it, and it feels like a really, really big deal. So yeah, so it seems like this might be the start of everything unraveling. Not that he's ever really had a chance to rest and just enjoy things anyway. Like, I feel like every episode's had some problem interfering with his plan in some way. But this was a big thing because he had to think on his feet. He had to kill someone unexpectedly, even more unexpected than the first time. While he hadn't been planning on doing the murder with Dickie maybe quite in that way, he was planning on killing him, I think, the entire time, so it did feel like, okay, this has moved up ahead of schedule, but he probably had some ideas in place for how he was going to, like, carry out the aftermath, maybe beyond the dead body ditching, which did obviously take some effort. Whereas this was completely unexpected. This was someone interfering that he didn't expect to show up. He had to think on his feet out of, like, just the fear that he was about to lose this life and that he was getting caught. And then every single moment after that in this episode was exceptionally well done and directed. It was very nail-biting. It was very much focusing on all the obstacles that are coming in his place for stopping him from getting away with this. And you're kind of waiting for, like the way he's sort of panicking in between moments, like quietly, like he's not like yelling and swearing and anything like that. He's not animated. He can't be because people might hear that. But, you know, him panting as he's scrubbing the blood off the stairs quickly as he can, the fear as he realizes that he's left some evidence here that he has to deal with, the driving back out and back again because all of that stuff, and you know, fixing the mistake that he's left, and that little moment of panic even when he gets to the car where he's left a dead body in it and he's going for the passport and stuff, and it looks like the body's not there, and it's only just slumped over so you can't see it in the window, but it looks like the body's not there. And for a moment, there's a bit of a fear, like, wait, is he not actually dead? Did he sort of stumble out of the car eventually? Or is there did someone find him? He's just slumped over, but there's that couple of seconds where it's going through his mind, and therefore it's going through the audience's mind. And I think that's the thing that's so effective about this type of like storytelling and direction, when it's just these quiet, mostly quiet stories where it's just the character trying to like navigate a situation where it's naturally very tense and very, like, you know, they're constantly under threat and they're having to think on their feet. What's so good about it is that when it's done well like it is here, and you feel those moments, is that I think it does a really good job of putting you in the mind of the character. Because like I said, that moment when the elevator's coming up and you can hear it, and he's worried that someone's coming to his door, and then you hear the clank, you hear the footsteps, and then eventually that knock on the door happens. Like, I felt all of that. I felt the fear and what he was scared of in that moment, and this idea that it's impending, that it's coming for him. Same again when he's panicking and having to scrub the blood. Now, admittedly, the one deviation there is that because I'm not in the situation, I was thinking a bit more clearly and sort of predicted that that was a mistake. But regardless, like, still him going through these moments and the sort of that he could be caught at any moment and feeling that fear and feeling that rush, those ups and downs are constantly there. And then just adding on this idea that he keeps trying to, like, he thinks he's finished and he can relax and he can take a drink. And then he realizes, oh no, I've messed up. I left the passport in his jacket. And he has to go all the way back out. He has to do all of that again. And he finally thinks he's done. He breathes a sigh of relief. He lets his guard down and thinks he's won and takes a sip of his drink. I've done it again, goddammit. I'm the best. I'm Tom effing Ripley. I'm the best at this. Only to then have the camera slowly reveal that no, there's something still there. He's messed up. And the cat, the witness that he thought he didn't have to worry about, the cat has, you know, spread the blood around in paw prints, and that's it. Like, this is the evidence that might link to him and might end up with him on the run again. You know, I don't know how this is going to progress from here, but this felt like a very exciting episode, but the ending felt like a pivotal point where, oh, I think he's effed up here, and we're going to see the fallout of that. This was great. Loved it. It might even be better than episode 3, which was my favourite, but I think it's debatable. Like, I'd have to think about it, probably. I think I like this one just a nudge more, just purely because of it felt like an obstacle course, almost, having to deal with a dead body, because it was in a very... Because last time it was in the middle of the ocean, and yeah, there was the one moment with the boat in the distance that might see something, but for the most part, it was like, okay, he's got, like, freedom to deal with this, even though there's a lot of details for him to worry about. This time, he's in the middle of an occupied apartment building full of tenants. He has to go out onto a busy street. He has to go past this landlady office where she's always snooping around. All of it was like everything turned up to 11 for like this was like the hard mode. The boat murder was easy mode. This was hard mode, and that made it a lot more fun and exciting to watch. So there you go. That's it. And apologies if you can hear some roadworks that are happening outside that started in the middle of this review. I hope you don't hear it. But I hear it. It's distracting me. But that's episode 5 of Ripley. I will be back in a couple of weeks' time with episode 6. So exciting to see how we veer as this goes forward. I was thinking before the ending, not too long before the end, but I was thinking, oh, is he going to eventually have to kill Marge as well? Is Marge going to come looking, and eventually he can't deal with her, and he's going to either kill her or try to kill her, and that might be the unraveling. But this evidence being left definitely makes me feel like, oh no, like the authorities are going to start snooping and we're going to maybe get a different path there. Marge, I'm sure, is going to come back into it again. I have no doubt of that. How loud is that? Oh, Jesus. Maybe you can't hear it, but I'm hearing like someone with a hedge cutter outside. Anyway, that's the review. Thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, support all the content over on Patreon. It's what helps me do this as often as I do, both on this channel and over in Melfuzz Movies with the movie podcast. Go check those out. But you can support us on Patreon, and you can, of course, like, subscribe, all the usual things. It helps out a bunch if you do. So thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?